Bigfoot's Eyes. The most terrifying and human encounter of 1989. He stood frozen on the old wooden stand. Beneath him, the giant creature rose, tall, dark fur covering its body, shoulders broad as mountain cliffs. It lifted a hand to shade its brow, and from its deep-set eyes came a sharp glimmer looking straight at him. The forest fell silent. Only his heartbeat remained pounding as if it might burst through his chest. His breath came heavy, his hands trembled, and a cold sweat slid down his back. He knew just one step, and it could bring the frail hunting stand crashing down. In that moment, he thought he heard his own whisper. "Please don't climb up here. Please don't." Still, it watched him. Its gaze lingered, piercing through every fragile defense as though it wished to carve something deep into his soul. Then, from its low, cavernous throat, it released a long, resounding howl echoing through the forest canopy, raising every hair on his neck. How had he fallen into this moment? The story began on a morning in Randolph Forest during deer season in the winter of 1989. Before we continue, leave the name of your city in the comments below. And when we finish, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Deer season, 1989, Randolph Forest, West Virginia. The trail into the mountains had long been abandoned, washed out by floods overgrown with wild grass. Trucks could only go so far. From there, the hunting party carried rifles, rations, and pressed on by foot. The storyteller was 24 then, just home from military service. The winter hunts with his father and friends were a tradition, a thread that bound him to home. They once knew every slope, every creek by heart. But that morning the forest felt changed, its chill, unfamiliar, the fog heavy as a curtain, turning what was once familiar into something distant and uncertain. He climbed the old forgotten hunting stand, choosing a high spot overlooking the wide valley. The sun had not fully risen, its dim light veiling the trees in gray. After the weary climb, sweat dampened his back, and with a long breath he allowed himself to rest, to close his eyes just for a moment. He could not know that within hours fate would blur the line between man and legend. Part 1. The smell. He woke with a start to a strange feeling. No birds sang in the morning air. No wind whispered through the leaves. The forest was still in eerie, unsettling silence. Then came the smell. It struck him all at once, harsh, pungent, half the stench of wet animal, half the rot of long-dead flesh. The odor was so strong it choked his breath, twisted his stomach, and sent a cold sweat running down his spine. He understood something was wrong in the woods. Carefully, he peered down. Just a few meters from the stand, a figure appeared. Smaller than he imagined, barely 5 feet tall, yet covered in tangled reddish-brown hair. Its round shoulders bent forward like a child searching for something in the dirt. He held his breath. The creature gathered the orange peels, the apple skins he had tossed aside. It sniffed, pressed them to its nose, and even tasted them with its tongue. Each labored breath rattled like heavy wind across the silent earth. His heart pounded. His hands shook against the rifle's grip. Part of him urged to raise the gun, but his body refused, locked in fear. He dared not move, dared not make a sound, afraid one mistake would draw its eyes upward. And then it paused. Its shoulders stiffened. Slowly the head began to turn, as if sensing something it could not yet see. In that fragile instant, every muscle in his body went taut. He felt that if it looked up, if their eyes met the world he knew would collapse. For just a moment, he saw its hands. Long fingers, nails not sharp, almost human. They trembled slightly as though uncertain. He clenched his teeth, his heartbeat thundering, blood rushing hot through his veins. The forest remained still. Only the stench hung heavy, and his own frantic breath filled the silence. A lesson flashed through his mind. Sometimes the most terrifying thing is not the beast that roars, but the silence of the forest waiting to reveal its secret. Part 2. The language in reverse. He was still trying to keep his breath steady when suddenly a sound rose from the slope above. It was not the wind, not an animal's cry. It twisted and warped, screeching in broken bursts like an old record being played backwards. The eerie sound set every hair on his body on edge, his skin prickling with goosebumps. Every cell in him tensed as if bracing for something unseen. The small creature beneath the stand changed at once, its snapped upright eyes darting, its whole body trembling as if it had been caught in the act. Then from its throat came a series of guttural heavy calls rolling through the air. His mouth fell open. This was a conversation. Not random howls, not a wild animal's alarm, but two voices calling, answering like an ancient tongue being spoken across the forest. The sound from the slope grew closer. Each step landed heavy drumming against the ground, shaking the earth, rattling his chest. His heart pounded wildly. He tried to peer through the leaves, but his sight was blocked. Only the echoes reached him, harsh, shrill, as if the forest itself were being snapped apart, bone by bone. And then the giant emerged. From the edge of the trees, it stepped forward twice the height of the smaller one. Shoulders, broad arms long enough to nearly touch its knees, its dark fur thick as a moving wall. With each stride, the canopy above shuddered. The smaller one instantly bent low, its cries turning pleading, almost childlike in their tone. The larger bellowed, raising one arm and striking the air, a gesture of rebuke. He sat in stunned silence. Before his eyes, it seemed less a nightmare, more a family, a child being scolded for daring to approach the scent of man. A father angry, yet protective. He dared not move, but every detail seared into his mind, the gestures, the pointing the way. The smaller body trembled, bowing as if in guilt. It was too human, painfully human. And then without warning, the smaller one jerked its head upward. Its eyes flashed, locking onto him. He almost cried out. The moment froze heavy and still, those eyes curious, fearful, yet unmistakably aware. It had found him. A piercing cry tore the sky, bursting from the small creature's throat. The sound rang in his ears, numbing them, while his heart dropped into a deep abyss. At once the giant roared back, its thunderous voice rolling like storm clouds, shaking the very forest. He felt as though he had been dragged into an argument inside a strange home, one where he was not welcome. In that chaos, a thought flickered in his mind. Perhaps they have laws. Perhaps they have feelings. But if so, how would they treat an intruder like me? Fear and curiosity knotted together until he could hardly breathe. His body was stone, his eyes wide, following every movement of the two beings. The deep woods hold mysteries mankind has never understood. And sometimes the most terrifying thing is not the monster itself, but the moment you realize it knows you are here. Part 3. The father. The smaller one had barely cried out when it was shoved sharply aside. The giant stepped forward, towering high, its shadow swallowing the clearing. It bent low, rumbling words like thunder. Broad arms swept through the air, one massive hand pointing hard at the little one's chest, then outward commands firm and unyielding. The smaller creature shrank, trembling, then sank into a squat, covering its head with both hands like a child caught in wrongdoing. The sight sent a chill racing down his spine. There could be no doubt what stood before him were not mindless beasts, but father and child. A family bound by discipline, by order, by a mixture of love and wrath. His eyes blurred. In the midst of his terror, his heart shifted, struck by a strange, unexpected empathy. He remembered his own father, the stern rebukes of childhood, the looks that carried anger, yes, but also deep concern. And he realized out here in the wilderness, even creatures of legend feared losing their young. The giant stood tall, muscles rippling beneath its fur. From its throat came deep, resonant sounds, each one falling heavy like stones cast into a canyon, reverberating through the trees. The smaller whimpered at times, pushing back but always retreating, eyes lowered in surrender. In that instant, he understood a father's true strength is not in his fists but in his protection. The giant was not only scolding, it was shielding, standing between danger and the child it loved. He gripped the rotting wood of the stand chest, heaving. A question pierced his mind. If it knows I am here, will it protect by driving me away? Or destroy me at the root? Fear consumed him. Every gesture of the giant radiated authority, an authority no man could oppose. And he saw himself for what he was, an intruder perched on fragile boards, judged by the forest itself. Across all beings, man, or what we call monster fatherhood, remains sacred. It may wear the mask of anger, but beneath it lives love, protection, and the will to guard. And when we face it, we glimpse ourselves children once shielded by their fathers. Part 4. The Gaze. The air turned solid. The smaller creature still bowed, whimpering under its father's scolding, when suddenly its head snapped upward. Eyes gleamed through the tangle of fur, and that gaze struck straight toward the wooden stand. He froze. His heart missed a beat. Breath caught in his throat. There was no doubt it had seen him. Those eyes, wide, deep, dark brown, were not the hungry eyes of a predator. They were the eyes of a child who had stumbled upon a forbidden secret. Eyes filled with fear, with curiosity, and with a sharp flash of anger. A gaze so piercing it chilled his blood. A long, shrill cry ripped from its throat, tearing through the morning mist spilling across the slope. Instantly, the giant raised its head, roaring back a thunderous bellow, rolling like a storm shaking the forest. He clutched his rifle tight, but his body shook so violently his finger would not obey. He knew well no shot could save him. One leap from that towering beast would bring the fragile stand crashing down, and he would never live to tell the tale. The giant turned slowly. Not in haste, but each movement sliced the air like a blade. It rose tall, one broad hand shading its brow, its dark eyes sweeping the leaves, until they locked onto him. He went rigid. It was as though he stood before an ancient judge, no defense, no escape. Only the verdict of that gaze. Those eyes, large, black, yet shining with clarity, looked into him. This was no dull beast. This was intelligence. Alien, dangerous, and unmistakably weighing its choice. For a fleeting moment he wondered, could it know I mean no harm, or does it see only an intruder to be erased? His body shook uncontrollably. He longed to cry out to drive it away, but his throat was dry, his tongue sealed in silence. The giant lowered its arm, but its eyes never wavered. Then it did what he could never have expected. It crouched down, mirroring the smaller one, as if to calm or to show, I see you. I know you are here. In that moment, fear mingled with awe. He felt it clearly. It could think. It was judging. It knew he was not the same as the child it had just shielded. His heart pounded. He thought of his own father, how he had stood between him and danger, stern but protective. And now, in the eyes of this so-called monster, he saw the same. A breeze stirred. The canopy rustled softly. The smaller one cried again, but weaker this time, like the plea of a child hiding behind its father. Slowly, the giant pushed it away, signaling it to leave. The little one hesitated, then obeyed, darting into the forest until it vanished. Only the giant remained standing between him and the unknown. It rose to full height. One step, then another, moving closer. The wooden boards beneath him seemed to tremble, not from its weight, but from the thunder of his own heartbeat. He wanted to turn away, but could not. The moment stretched into eternity. He was terrified to tears, yet unable to look away. For he knew few men had ever stared into the eyes of a living legend. There are moments in life when we must face our greatest fear, and in that terrible gaze sometimes we see ourselves, our families, our love, our fear of loss. What we call monster may yet carry a heart that protects and chooses. Part 5. The Retreat of the Strong. He held his breath. The air was so heavy it felt as though it could be cut into pieces. The giant stood tall, its shadow swallowing the first light of morning. Its eyes remained locked on him, carving a warning without the need for words. And then it stepped back, slowly. Every movement carried immense power, yet no urgency, as though it were saying, if I wished I could have destroyed you, but I choose not to. He swallowed hard. His heart hammered fast, sharp pain pulsing in his chest. And in that moment he realized true strength is not always shown in violence. Sometimes the strongest are those who know when to stop. The giant tilted back its head and released a long, resonant call. The sound rolled deep, vibrating through the earth, echoing from tree to tree. It was not a cry of rage, but something else, perhaps a call to others, perhaps a farewell, or perhaps a final warning to the intruder who had trespassed. From afar came the reply, wood striking wood, thock, thock, thock. As if someone beat a log with a heavy branch, the rhythm was steady, haunting each strike, raising goosebumps across his skin. Perhaps it was their signal, the way they marked the forest as claimed. He sat motionless, sweat dripping cold onto his hands. The giant turned sunlight glinting off the fur across its broad shoulders. That towering figure began to leave, each step parting the forest like a curtain. It did not run. It did not rush. It moved as though the woods themselves belonged to it. At times it looked back, its eyes flashing. There was no intent to attack. Yet the look seemed to say, "I know you. Do not ever forget this." Then its shadow blurred into the mist, swallowed by trees. One final cry carried across the ridges, long and distant, until only the soft rustle of falling leaves remained. He sat frozen in the stand legs, trembling, nearly paralyzed. Not until half an hour later, when birds returned, when the wind stirred once more, did he finally dare to breathe deep again. On his way back, he met his hunting companion. The man's face was pale, his hands shaking, as he spoke of a massive dark figure that had run swiftly past his post. They exchanged a look, neither dared to laugh. Both knew what they had seen was no illusion. In his heart, a truth settled heavy. Bigfoot was not only real, but bound by rules, by family, by intelligence. And more than that, he carried away a greater lesson. The mightiest is not the one who strikes to prove his power, but the one who walks away when given the chance. In the depths of the forest, he had seen it clearly. Even a so-called monster knows how to protect, how to hold back, how to leave. If mankind could learn that lesson, perhaps the world would bleed less and rest more in peace. By the time the two hunters returned to camp, the evening sun had painted the Randolph Mountains in gold. Neither spoke much. They simply sat beside the small fire, eyes fixed on the glowing embers, as if both were guarding a secret too great to be spoken aloud. At last, his friend admitted quietly, "I saw it too. Massive, pitch black, moving swift as the wind." He nodded gently. A weight lifted, yet a deeper burden took its place. That night he could not sleep. In his mind, those eyes returned, the deep, knowing gaze of a creature that could think, that could shield its young, and that had chosen mercy for the weaker one. Eyes both terrifying and profoundly human. Years passed, yet the memory never faded. Whenever he closed his eyes, he still saw the silent forest, still smelled the acrid stench, still saw that giant shadow turning back to look at him. And he knew his life had changed forever in that moment. He no longer looked at the forest the same way, no longer as a place to conquer, to hunt, to take, but as a home where other families lived, where beings loved, grew angry, and protected one another. That story taught him this: true strength is never about killing nor about proving power. True strength lies in the choice to protect, the choice to forgive, the choice to retreat when needed. It is in this way that the forest keeps its balance. If you believe that love and compassion can transform even what seems most frightening, share this story so that others may hear it too. And before you leave, write the name of your city in the comments, and don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss the next Bigfoot tale, stories from that thin line between man and legend revealed in just a single gaze.